1, 2. Boom, boom, boom. We're live. There we go. 1, 2. Hope this is working for you, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. How's it going? Hope you're well. Before we get started, like, share, subscribe, everybody. Do the thing. Drop into the chat and on the live on the YouTube there, by the way, as well. You can do that. Drop me a wee message. I've got no guests this week, unfortunately. I just didn't have time to get anyone sort of organised. I'm very, very busy. Doing fuck all, to be honest with you. And the heat. Oh, I'm looking quite tan. So I've been getting out and getting outdoors, trying to get my tan on. Well, I haven't really, just been out doing a bit of sport and stuff. So, but listen, like, share, subscribe, do the thing, share it onto the YouTubes, onto the Twitters, onto the Instas, onto the Face friends. I don't do a Facebook thing, so if you could do that for me, that would be really cool. I know it's kind of it is a good place for a lot of people, but I fucking hate it, so I don't bother. But maybe you can for me instead. But yeah, so tonight I want to talk to you about space dicks, space billionaires. When did this shit start? When the fuck did space billionaires become a thing? I'm not joking. This is absolutely fucking mental. Oh, give me a sec. I just want to do something behind me here before I push on. There we go. So, yeah. Space billionaires. Right. Why do we not want space billionaires? You fucking know full well why we don't want space billionaires. They are the literal embodiment of a failed system. And it's interesting that I'm going to talk about these two subjects tonight. The two subjects are, of course, Jeff Bezos on his space dick. If you haven't seen the ship, there's a picture of it on screen now. There you go. It looks like a big cock and balls. It's called Blue Origin. And it's a vanity project of the owner, I guess, of Amazon. The company that is everywhere. Yeah. So, it's a problem. It's a problem for us all. As I said, and it's interesting, I'm going to talk about these two things. I'm going to talk about this asshole and Cuba and the differences in the systems and the differences as to why we have this and why we have Cuba and all the rest of it. If you're watching this, you're probably a bit of a fan of Cuba, bit of a fanboy, and I am. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. To me, Cuba represents, excuse me, the living embodiment of revolutionary spirit. And what are we revolting against? We're revolting against capitalism and exploitation, because capitalism is exploitation. Does exploitation exist elsewhere? Of course it does. No one's saying it doesn't. But it's built into the system with capitalism. So, so that's what we're going to talk about. So, I should have started really, I think, with what I've been getting up to in the past week. Haven't been doing much. I got back to my football. Remember I was saying I wasn't going to play football? I am again. So I went back last week and I went back this week. I've relegated myself to staying in nets, staying in goals. That's fine. I love that anyway. I'm good at that. I think I'm good at that. I'm okay at that. I'm okay at that. I'm not good at it. I'm okay at it, but I will get better. So I went back to that last night, and my knee is holding up. It's okay. I'm a bit limpy today, but my knee is holding up. So that was nice. Got out on my bike a few times in the nice weather. Today, me and Jeannie had a day to ourselves, and we took ourselves off to Torella Beach. They're up in Newcastle, just above Newcastle, or above outside Dundrum, and it was gorgeous. And it really was. I took a couple of lovely photographs. I should have put them up on the screen. I'll maybe throw those on next week or whatever, but I will say this. We went up, and with the queue to get into the wee car park. It's only a tiny little car park. It's only £4. Whatever, right? No one's complaining about that. We go down to the beach. Find us. It's quite crowded. When I say quite crowded, it's quite crowded for a Wednesday morning. You know, there's no one in this country work for fuck's sake. But it wasn't too bad. I imagine at the weekends it's quite a different story. But we found the amount of litter on the beach was actually, it kind of blew me away. Now, and the reason that I act surprised is because I know full well how fucking the dirty clarts that we are in this country, because I, as you know, cycle the highways and byways on my bike a couple of days a week, more than a couple of days a week, and I get to see all the beautiful places that we have in Ireland, in the north here, and I see the litter everywhere, and it's depressing. We're dirty bastards. You go out into the middle of nowhere, B roads, lanes, and there's a big McDonald's bag full of all, just some fucker driving along in his car, fucks it out the window instead of taking it home. So that there's litter but I didn't expect to see it, so much of it on the beach. Then I had occasion, went for a wee swimmy poos and all the rest of it, and that was great. And I was going to bring my float. I just brought my swim bag. I've got my outdoor swim bag, and in it is the float. You know, the orange float thing that we have. So it's in that. It's in the bag, and so I brought it with me in case I said if I'm going to go for a swim, I'll need that. But I haven't been to Torella Beach in years, and I forgot how shallow it is. It seems to go it's about 3 foot deep for miles. So if you're going out there with a fucking David Hasselhoff swim float, you know, you're going to look pretty foolish. So I didn't do that. We went for a wee swimmy poos anyway, and it was lovely. So then me and Janie took ourselves off to the dunes, went for a wee walk on the dunes, and then I had occasion to go to the urinal. And oh my fucking god, that thing hasn't been cleaned since 1976. It was disgusting. And it was just went for a wee pee. And I don't want to, you know, maybe some of you are still eating your dinner or have just ate it, but it wasn't nice. And whatever council it is that's in charge, you really do need to sort your fucking game out, because that was disgusting. You know what I'm going to do just before I push on? I'm just going to check that this is working, that the audio is working, because you know me and my technical woes. So let me just see if I can hear it. There we go. I heard myself, so I must be working. So awesome. Reverend Duffer's going to join me tonight on the live stream. It's not coming up on the old chat, so if anybody's chatting to me, saying hello, pop out chat. I'm going to do that. Pop out chat. There we go. So if anybody wants to say hello or ask me a question or whatever it is, I'll just do a wee thing. There we go. So the chat window is open. So if anybody wants to have a wee chat with me or talk, I can take the time to do that. So, to the thing, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this asshole. Now, I'll play you the video first. That's what I'll do. So there's a little video here of Jeff Bezos on his baldy fucking head. No, I don't mean to offend bald people or anything. Some of my dearest friends are bald people. Here's a little video of that fucking asshole. The sad thing about this is that it actually made it back. And that's very cruel, Andrew. Yes, it is. And I don't really mean it, but kind of do too. So check this out.
T-minus 10.
For
9,
those of you listening.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1.
There's this rocket there. It's doing the thing.
We have liftoff.
It does look like a big penis. It looks like the spaceship that Dr. Evil shot when he escaped. And he did a big rotation with his mini-me, didn't he? In a big spaceship that looked like a cock and balls. And that's exactly what that looks like. It literally does look like a cock and balls. Knock it back there, let's see. It looks like a dick. It looks like a big massive white dick. Surely I could have done something about that. You know, okay. You're not impressing anyone, Jeffrey. But so he starts talking in a second.
You know that they've hit apogee, their maximum altitude, and you hear they're having quite an experience.
The zero-G piece may have been one of the biggest surprises because it felt so normal. It felt so almost like we were, as humans, evolved to be in that environment, which I know is impossible, but it felt so serene and peaceful in the floating.
It's amazing how much shit you can talk when you're worth, what is he worth? 250 billion pounds or dollars? You can sit there and talk shit and people will just nod at you. Oh, that's right, Jeff. Really, Jeff? Is that really what it's like? Fucking cunt.
And
there's the lander.
Welcome back, New Shepard.
Yeah, there's a wee bit. I've seen a bit of. I haven't seen all of this actually, but I've seen a little bit of it.
Every astronaut, everybody who's been up into space, they say this, that it changes them, and they look at it and they're kind of amazed and awestruck by the Earth and its beauty, but also by its fragility. And I can vouch for that. When I look out, when we're sitting in this room and when we're driving our cars and we're moving around the planet in our normal ways, the atmosphere is so gigantic. We're these tiny little things, and the planet, the atmosphere is so big. But when you get up above it, what you see is it's actually incredibly thin.
Right. Listen to what
they
this
say
fucking psychopath is saying.
They look at it and
just
they're
knock
kind
it
of
back
amazed and awestruck by the Earth and its beauty, but also by its fragility. And I can vouch for that. When I look out, when we're sitting in this room and when we're driving
Jeff
our
Bezos, the founder of Amazon, the richest man in the world, I believe, certainly one of the richest, like top 3 or something like that. It's taken, and this is the problem with the mindset of the capitalist billionaire class. They have to experience it. They're devoid of empathy. They can't empathize. So scientists have been saying it for years. He's said it himself. He's heard astronauts say it, that they go out into space and they see how fragile the planet is. We've seen the photograph. We've seen the Carl Sagan, the blue dot photo, and all that stuff means nothing to him. He still builds his business. That is an environmental fucking catastrophe. We know this from a few weeks ago. The very latest thing was these Amazon fulfillment centres, which is what they call them, burning and destroying stock because it's cheaper to destroy it rather than store it much longer. They have an algorithm that works all this out, and they bring a certain amount of stock into an area of the warehouses and they destroy. And this is in all of them. They found the one in Scotland and it was reported on the news in America, and then all the American ones have all, yeah, we do that too. Well, whistleblowers have. They haven't admitted it. So he's sitting there. What he's saying is, it takes him personally to go to space before he understands the fragility of the planet that we're living on.
We're moving around the planet in our normal ways. The atmosphere is so gigantic. We're these tiny little things, and the planet, the atmosphere is so big. But when you get up above it, what you see is it's actually incredibly thin. It's this tiny little fragile thing. And as we move about the planet, we're damaging it.
Fuck me. That's a psycho. That's a psychopath talking. He needs to understand. And he's sitting there, and this is rich kids playing. This is what he is. Now, not that I'm any fan of early stages of capitalism, but when they weren't billionaires back then, but they were multi-millionaires, which was very much so its equivalent today. The Carnegies and the Rockefellers and all these cartoonish characters that sprung up at the end of the 1800s and beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Whenever they wanted to express a little bit of public goodwill, or maybe they want to alleviate themselves of a little bit of guilt, and they were burdened with guilt. A lot of these guys, they knew they were bad guys. You don't get to be a billionaire by being a good guy, and certainly back in the 1900s, you certainly did not. You were a fucking evil Machiavellian bastard that would cut his own granny's throat to get ahead, and they fucking did. But when they were around and they wanted to spend some public show-off money, they went and built a fucking music hall, or built 1,000 public libraries, as Carnegie did. Andrew Carnegie, I don't know if you know this, in your town, all across in Scotland and Ireland, and I'm pretty sure England as well, and certainly in America, you may have a Carnegie Street, and on that street there might be a library. That was built and paid for by Andrew Carnegie 100 years ago. That's what that was. So that was a pub. That's how much money he had. He could do that all over the world, and he did. So, or they'd built some grand concert hall. You dig it? This is what they're doing instead. Going to space and pretending to just acknowledge the fragility of the planet, the one that they're fucking destroying, and they've all got that in common. Virgin Media dude, what do you call him? Branson owns an airline. Tesla guy makes cars. I know that they're electric cars, but they're not. His production facilities and plants are not environmentally friendly. In fact, it's impossible. Until the problem with cars is it's a personalised transportation vehicle, and we need to get away from the concept that we're entitled to a personalised transportation vehicle. Right? Why do we need a car? I look out in my street, and any evening I could go out there now if this camera would lead, if the lead would reach, which it won't, but if I could point it down the street, and you'll see £250,000 worth of cars sitting in people's driveways doing fuck all. There's some just normal terraced houses, and there'll be 4 or 5 cars parked outside them, representing what in capital, what in earnings, what in future earnings. If you've got it on credit, you've got to go and work for that. Do you know what I mean? So the very concept of having a car should be foreign to us. I digress. I'm pushing on a wee bit, but Elon Musk, that's his name, isn't it? The Tesla guy. He's the other space billionaire. So I do find it hilarious that he's admitting there that it takes him personally to go to space to see the planet as being fragile. And one of the reasons that you and I may not get what all that means, it's very simple. When you're a billionaire, you don't live like you and me. You don't live like us. You don't get to see things changing. Like the way, like if you live in this country and if you've got a pair of eyes, you can see how things aren't quite right. We were sitting in the heat the other day. Hottest day ever recorded in Ireland at 32 point something degrees. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It fucking freaked me out. It really did freak me out. I've never experienced that in this country. I don't do well in that type of heat. I kind of shut down a wee bit. Just not used to it. I enjoy it when I'm away, when I'm in countries that are supposed to be like that. But in this one, not so much. And these guys live a gilded lifestyle. Everything gets done for them. That he can sit there and say something so fucking stupid and crass. I went to space and I saw the fucking fragility of the atmosphere. That, I mean, they've been from men have been going to space, and women. The early cosmonauts, Russian cosmonauts were women. They've been saying the same thing, but it takes him personally to go to space to acknowledge it. So there's him getting off with all his paid acolytes, high-fiving him like he's fucking awesome, which he is not. He is a psycho. And he is. These people are psychopaths. There was a great study. There was a study done actually, the empathy part of the brain that has empathy, and the richer you get, the less it shrinks. There was another one done. I think it was done in Stanford, one of those great American university institutions. I won't say learning institutions, say university institutions, and they set up at a zebra crossing. I don't know what they're called in America, but there was like a zebra crossing, and they had someone step up to the zebra crossing as the car was coming in the opposite direction. I'd love to find a study. I've spoke about it before, but the study's available online. I'll find it and stick it up. But they noticed that the car was more likely to stop the less expensive the car was. So the more luxurious the car was, the less likely it was to stop coming up to the zebra crossing. They would try and gun it to get across before. So just by the by, it's an interesting little thing, an interesting little side note, I think. So yeah, these guys blasting themselves off into space for shits and giggles because they can, as if they're doing something great for humanity, which is how they're trying to play this. And if you say, well, and you notice that it's all over the media as well, so, and they get a lot of media time, blowing smoke up their hole too. And it's very simple. Why would all these media companies uncritically give Jeff Bezos time? Or if they do criticize, it's rather gentle. It's just sort of, it's a little bit. Why would they do it? Because of fucking advertising. Because of money, baby. You know, in the US, the news channels, you get these sections that are like sponsored by Raytheon. In Ireland, the weather, I tweeted this the other day. It was interesting. All the weather channels were the Weather Channel on News Talk, the Weather Channel on RTE TV, the Weather Channel on RTE Radio. They were all sponsored by companies that do damage to the environment. I don't know what they get out of it. They don't get, well, apart from they don't get criticised. That's what they get out of it, and that's what he gets out of it. So they put advertising dollars goes a long way. And as I said, in America, they've got news channels sponsored. This section is sponsored by Raytheon. Making America say they make missiles and tanks, for fuck's sake. No one watching the news is in the market for a tank or fucking ground-to-air missile. They're just not. I bet I would go out on a limb and just say that. So there we go. Space assholes. We don't fucking need them. We don't fucking want them. They're no use to man their beast. despite what the propaganda will say, they're achieving nothing. This isn't space exploration. They're not sending a fucking satellite to Jupiter. This is space jollies for millionaires. You're never going to be on this. You know, you're never going to have the spare how many thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever it's going to take to get on this thing for a trip around the globe. Never going to happen. It's not for you, it's for them. And they get it by exploiting their workers, not paying their taxes, and fucking the environment. Externalities. There's just like, I've just turned the theme on because this section was over in my head, but I've just thought of something else to say. In economics, there's a thing, I've mentioned this before, there's a thing called externalities. And externalities is the cost of the product that isn't included in the purchase of the product. So the price that the product costs on the shelf. There's an externality that isn't included. And what is that? Right, the cost to the environment. How much does it cost to make a cardboard box? How much does it cost to dispose of a cardboard box? How much does it cost to dispose of the plastic product once it's become obsolete? Once its built-in obsolescence has reached its date, has been achieved, which is another psychopathic thing to do. Make a product to fail so that you have to buy another product. In the very near future, and increasingly near future, things are, we know, light bulbs being the perfect example. They used to last for many, many, many thousands of hours, and then the manufacturers got together, monopolised, and have been bringing that down ever since. Now we're getting weeks out of light bulbs in this house. But, so where do those externalities go? Who pays for those? Well, the public purse pays for those. The taxpayer pays for those. And in more worryingly, the environment pays for those. So all the things that aren't, like, all this shit getting washed up on beaches everywhere and creating these depressingly huge mountains of trash somewhere in the world. That's an externality that isn't included in the price of the product. No one has to pay for that. Or the taxpayer does have to pay for that. Or the taxpayer pays for that. Which means, so then the taxpayer has less money to spend on things that they need to do, like provide healthcare and education, social care for our elderly, etc., 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 and cleaning toilets at Tarala Beach. So can you feel me? That's what I'm saying to you. So, we're going to move on. No more space dicks, please. We don't need them. Fucking assholes. So, the next bit is going to be about Cuba. Now, I want to talk about this again because I'm kind of a bit in love with Cuba and the revolution. And the revolutionary zeal that they have, and it's under a lot of pressure at the minute, but not as much pressure as the media, the mainstream media would have you believe. But you know that, I know you know that. So I'm going to play you a little video here. This is the mayor of Miami.
I want to bring in the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, back on this program today.
There we go.
Your Honor, you're calling for the U.S. to intervene in Cuba. How exactly should we intervene, and under what circumstances?
Well, thank you so much.
The mayor of Miami, who is a Cuban, is a son of Cubans, is calling for US intervention in Miami. Now I have another video about this, of breaking this down a bit better than I can, but you'll get this. So Watch this for a second.
Much, Barney, for covering this. This is an issue that I think very much matters to the United States. I think, Cuba is one of the largest narco traffickants in the region. It's a state sponsor of terrorists as designated by the United States, and it is exporting communism throughout the hemisphere.
So, Cuba is not a narco trafficker. That he would be thinking of the other, the other allies of the U.S., Colombia, the right wing. That had a right-wing junta in place for decades. So he's confusing Cuba. You think he'd know better, but he does with Colombia. And
the world,
the sponsor of terrorism bit, ha ha ha, hilarious. He would be referring to. Let me just get it up here. Where is it? Oh no, have I deleted it? No, here it is. What he would be referring to, so Cuba being a state sponsor of terrorism, what he would be referring to is when, it's here, right on, there we go, was when John Bolton, remember that fucking psycho, the moustache guy, he had a moustache like a walrus, he was the American National Security Advisor, and he referred, American National Security Advisor John Bolton labels Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela the troika of tyranny, blaming the trio for human rights abuses, causing regional stability, embracing communism. Like, so accusing them of embracing communism, because that's a crime now. It's a legitimate political and cultural, whatever you want to call it. It's a legitimate place to live, place to be, politically and culturally, economically. It's a system of government. Accuses them of it. Troika of tyranny. Now remember that. That's that. Remember saying about you? I was saying you last week or the week before about language, about how important it is. And they did this in there whenever they were getting ready to invade Iraq, and they were trying to manufacture consent. So that means they were putting these buzzwords out that the media was just recycling. So they were recycling press releases from the U.S. State Department and whatever countries' secret services that were getting involved in this. They were just recycling these press releases as if they were fact, and they created their own language. Do you remember this? So you had weapons of mass destruction. Remember that? We'd never heard of that before. And there was lots of the triangle of terror, George. But remember the triangle of terror? Was it Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, or was it Iran or Afghanistan and Cuba? I can't remember. But it was they create these words. And John Bolton, this was them throwing Cuba under the bus again, blaming that. So Bolton's speech marks a turning point in the Trump administration's policy towards the island, and it soon announced a wave of sanctions designed to penalise Cuba. So the troika of tyranny. So when this mayor, 4 years later, goes on to Fox News, Stuart Varney, this fucking dickhead is, that's his name, when he goes on 5 years later and says, state sponsor of terrorism, and you go, what does he mean? What does he mean? What does he mean, state sponsor of terrorism? That's what he's mean. He's leaping back 4 years. This troika of tyranny. And this is the problem when this stuff gets dropped into the discourse and doesn't get dismantled at the time. This fucking idiot is allowed to say it. And there are enough people out there watching this who are just going to suck that up. Cuba is a state sponsor of terrorism without understanding where that comes from and what that means. Can you dig? So let's go on.
And has been doing it for decades, and that is something that should interest the national security of the United States. There's a variety of different ways that the U.S. can intervene. Obviously, this is a humanitarian crisis because
there's absolutely no threat to the national security of the United States posed by Cuba. None. It's impossible. The threat to the United States that Cuba represents is another way of life. It's an alternative to capitalism, and it's on as they refer to, in their backyard, and they can't have it. That's it. Cuba is no threat to the national security of the United States.
One, the Cuban people have no food. Number two, they have no medicines and they're dying. And number three, the U.S. has intervened in Latin America in numerous occasions.
It's very hard to watch this without commenting constantly over his lies. The shortages that Cuba is experiencing come from the embargo that's been in place for 60 years. Started by John Kennedy and ramped up by successive presidents. So whatever shortages there's no medicine. We know for a fact that there's a COVID crisis. But where does the crisis come from? The Cubans have invented their own. They've made their own vaccine because they've invested very heavily in their biomedical sciences. They've got their own vaccine, but what they haven't got is needles, hypodermic syringes to give people the vaccine. So they don't have a shortage of the vaccine; they have a shortage of needles. Where does the shortage of needles come from? The embargo in place by the United States. So we'll push
has
on.
Intervened in Latin America in numerous occasions and has been very successful.
That's true. The U.S. has intervened and still does constantly in Latin America.
Obviously, the number one hope is that the Cuban people will successfully be able to change the system of government themselves from within.
There's no appetite for
through some sort of a public seizing of control of the country, or the military itself realizing that what it's doing to its people is a stain on the history of their lives, and that they should be on the right side of history. Failing all that, the United States has to really look at itself in the mirror and think about options that it's exercised in the past, like what it exercised with Panama, where it deposed Panama of Manuel Noriega, and Panama became a stable democracy for decades and decades.
He's calling for the invasion of Cuba.
That the United States considers, and it's something that can have ramifications not just for Cuba. It can have ramifications for Nicaragua and for Venezuela, which is tens of millions of people in this hemisphere.
That's pretty strong stuff, Your Honor. I think they might come down a little bit in terms of of how they react. Because the Trump administration...
So the mayor of Miami, the son of Cuban immigrants, is calling for an invasion. And he does it in another... I'm going to show you more. He does it more openly or more... with more opacity in another section I'm going to show you. He said America has intervened in other countries. Yes, it fucking has. Other South American countries? Yes, it fucking has. Show me the success story. And this is a big part of the problem whenever we're having these conversations, whenever these characters, these clowns are allowed to go on to... Now, Stuart Varney is a right-wing ghoul, so he's not gonna question the guy. He's not gonna give him a bit of a grilling. And you don't even need to really understand the situation at real depth to be able to hook that guy. Just ask him, show me the success story. Now, he says Panama. No. Panama represents an overthrow of a democracy. Panama wanted to nationalize the canal. The Americans wouldn't have it. So, and that's what you always hear. America and these American commentators and agitators, they always They always talk as though what they're concerned about is the people. This is a humanitarian intervention. We're going here to help the insert nationality here people. Venezuelan, Colombian, Nicaraguan, Ecuadorian, Panamanian, Iranian, Iraqis, Afghanis, any number of countries anywhere else in the world. Right? It's never that. And show me the example. Arguably, I don't know enough about the situation, so I'm not even going to make the arguments because I just don't know. And you'd think I would know, saying it was in Europe, but there was the breakup of the former Yugoslavia and what was going on there, and that was an intervention. There was also other things. That's another complicated situation. I'm going to throw back to World War II. Winston Churchill, of course, the Brits are involved, but show me the example. Let's regionalize this of Latin America. Show me the example where American interference has resulted in the betterment of child mortality rates, educational achievements. There isn't one. You can't point to one. There isn't one. But I can point to a few socialist ones. Chavez, Cuba, despite the embargo, they have achievements, and they are in trouble. Don't get me wrong, they are in trouble. It probably would take a military intervention, but I mean the Cuban people are going to fight back. The revolutionary zeal and spirit still exists, unlike here in Ireland quite a bit. We do like to shroud ourselves in the paraphernalia of the revolution of 1916, but we kind of just give and as James Connolly pointed out, when if Ireland achieves its freedom and does it under capitalism, it wasn't worth doing. And I'm not going to say that that's completely right. It was worth doing, but it was definitely done under capitalism, and we missed out a lot there. But anyway, I digress, as is my wont, as I want to do. So, I went onto the YouTubes, and I searched, just on Cuba YouTube, or Cuba, in the YouTube search, Cuba. It was all things like this. Thousands of Cubans protest against the communist government. All the listings were that. Or Cuba, the dark side, what they don't want you to know about Cuba, all this sort of stuff, right? So here's one of these little videos, another little shorty one. It's not long. What have I done with it? Miami, Cuba YouTube. There, is that it? No, Cuba. There it is. So check this out. This is from a news report on the American.
In Cuba, days of dissent with chants of liberty and freedom sweeping through the streets of Havana and other cities. Stones.
Do you hear how he uses the language of revolution? Liberty and freedom. They had a revolution to be liberated and freed from you. You fucking clown. But check this out. I'm going to make this big so you can see on the screen. But check it out. So now, these protests, I believe, are legitimate, but new protests in Cuba and the US. So check it out. And the US is referring to Miami.
Police and dumpsters overturned. The rarity of this type of protest in the communist country still sinking in. As 90 miles away in Miami, families protesting again overnight, fearful of how the Cuban military might respond to loved ones back home.
The situation is dire in Cuba. I mean, literally, the government is trying to cut off communication from the outside world so people don't see the brutality of the situation.
A generational economic...
So, there's a protest there. Now, check this out. I'll just knock this back. So,
see the brutality of the situation.
A generational economic crisis coupled with record COVID numbers and a lack of vaccine.
Check it out. He shows you. So look at that picture. Now, as soon as I saw this, I just went, right, let me see. And I started looking into this picture. They're not Cubans. This guy's not a Cuban. Look, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen. You probably can't. But this guy over here is not a fucking Cuban. These guys are all a bit too fat to be Cubans. This guy up the top right-hand corner. Top right-hand corner. Walking. Where is he? Let me see if I can get the thing right here. This guy. This dude. See if I can get it in. This dude here. That's not a fucking Cuban. He's not a Cuban. Right? This is in Miami. Look at all these cars. You don't get cars like that in Cuba. We know this. But they don't tell you that. They make it look... It's just... And it only flashed up for a fraction of a second. Check it out. I'll just knock it back to you see. See how long this is on screen for.
Brutality of the situation.
A generational economic crisis coupled with record COVID numbers and a lack of vaccine has fueled demands.
People queuing up in the hallway of a hospital, queued up on beds. Now, one thing we cannot, and this is how fucked this situation is, the Americans having the balls, quite frankly, the fucking audacity to criticize the Cuban medical system when they've got how many millions of their own citizens uninsured because you have to pay for it in America. Like, you pay for it everywhere. You pay for it through your fucking taxes. That's not free. And how many millions technically uninsured, or if they do have to go to the hospital, their excesses that they have to pay before they can get are unfeasible, and then they end up with a massive bill after the fact, even though they are fully, as they think, fully insured. For them to have the balls to criticize Cuba is hilarious. So we'll play that.
Cuba's 60-year dictatorship. The country claims to have multiple vaccines, but won't share its research. Some Cuban-American leaders pleading for American intervention.
Please do not abandon the Cuban people. Support them decisively.
So, I'm not going to play any more of that because, quite frankly, it's making me sick. I hate watching it because I recognize it as being just the same CIA Organization of American States, the OAS. It's just that same shit. They're trying to create unrest. But what's happened in a response to and the protests happened, but we have to question, were the protests legitimate? They may have been. There may have been sections of them that were legitimate, but there were definitely sections of them that were interfered with, that were funded by and paid for and agitated by the USA. And how do we know that? Well, the CIA tried to kill Fidel Castro 638 times. There's that little thing. So the Americans they're not leaving Cuba alone. And whenever they talk about humanitarian intervention, that's not what it is. They don't give a fuck about humanitarian intervention. They never did. They never will. It's not that. They want American corporations to go back into Cuba and take over, and they want all that land to be used in the American way. The wasteful, disgusting, Western capitalist way. That's what they want. And they want rid of the socialist, communist stain in their backyard, as they say. So, I'm going to play this other video. I don't know how I'm going to play it.
You're on to talk today about, we're going to talk about Cuba and what's happening in Cuba.
Yeah, I'm very fond of him. Jimmy Dore. He's an American left-wing comedian. And he's a comedian, but he's not a left-wing. Well, he is. I suppose he is now. But he sort of is a left-wing commentator. I'm very fond of him. I think he's very, very good. So, I'm going to play a bit of this. But it's not to listen to Jimmy, although I could quite easily. It's to listen to his guest. His guest is Max Blumenthal, who's one of these great outsider journalists, of which there are nowhere near enough. The most famous of which is currently rotten to death in Belmarsh Prison in London, Julian Assange. But anyway, we'll push on.
So this is from Reuters. Cuba sees the biggest protests for decades as the pandemic adds to woes, right? Now, I just want to remind people, Black Lives Matter may be the largest movement in U.S. history. That's just from last June, right? So look at that. It's happening at this, look, just a year later, the biggest protests in Cuba, right? Though some media outlets like Reuters say thousands of Cubans took to the streets. The New York Times wrote about hundreds of Cubans. Cuba is home to 11 million people. And according to Medea Benjamin, the protests pale in comparison, both in terms of turnout and in state repression to mass mobilizations that have rocked Colombia, Haiti, Chile, Ecuador, and other Latin American countries over the past few years, all countries that have suffered under capitalism, or even Portland, Oregon, or Ferguson, Missouri. So, according to Medea Benjamin, these protests in Cuba pale to the stuff we've seen everywhere else, including Portland, Oregon, and Ferguson, Missouri. And now the Miami mayor says the U.S. should consider airstrikes against Cuba because Cuba's not taking care of their people. And if someone's not taking care of their people, first thing you should do is start blowing those people up. And that's how you help them. Well, here, let me just show you what he said on the TV, and then we'll come to Max.
A repressive government and a cruel U.S. embargo. They deserve policies that empower them and help them improve their lives. Do you think that President Biden, looking at this situation, will lift that embargo? And do you think that's what he should do?
No, I don't think the embargo is cruel at all. And I think that the Cuban people are not asking for a lifting of the embargo. They're going out in the streets every single day talking about the failure of the communist regime to provide for its people. And I don't understand why that's so difficult for people to understand. It has failed for 6 decades. And what should be being contemplated right now is a coalition a potential military action in Cuba, similar to what has happened in both administrations, in both Republican and Democrat administrations. In Republican with Bush in Panama, they deposed Noriega, and that country had peaceful democracy for decades. And you had interventions by Democratic presidents, taking out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's a sovereign country where they took out a terrorist that probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, and President Clinton in Kosovo intervening in a humanitarian issue with airstrikes. So there have been many, many opportunities in the history.
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table. And there's a variety of ways the military can do it, but that's something that needs to be discussed. And needs to be
anybody with a fucking brain, especially the son of Cubans, be calling for the US to airstrike Cuba. He's just a capitalist. He's not a Cuban. He's a capitalist. He's forgotten he's Cuban.
Looked at as a potential option in addition to a variety of other options that can be discussed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard him, Max, but he said that the Cuban, I don't think the embargo is cruel at all. That's what he said. And then he said the Cuban people don't want to lift the embargo. They want the U.S. military to airstrike them. So I just want to let people know what's happening in the embargo. The embargo severely restricts Cuba's access to water treatment chemicals and spare parts for the island's water supply system. This has led to serious cutbacks in supplies of safe drinking water, which in turn is a factor in the rising incidence and mortality rates from waterborne diseases. Plus, there is a lack of such basic medical supplies as replacement parts for 30-year-old X-ray machines. As of April 2020, Cuba reported that the U.S. embargo continued to prevent the import of important medical supplies and equipment, as well as other essentials. So I just go to Max. What would you like to say to that clown from Miami?
Well, that clown from Miami is actually speaking the language of the right-wing Cuban-American lobby, which has been backed with billions of dollars from the U.S. government to achieve regime change in Cuba, and has failed against the will of the Cuban people. He's expressing a language that's really common there. I mean, you hear these calls for military attacks constantly. And as the Netflix film, The Wasp Network, actually showed, based on a very real recreation of real events, and Anya Parampil, for us at the Gray Zone, interviewed one of the lead characters in this film, Rene Gonzalez, who is a Cuban intelligence agent who actually penetrated this network of Cuban-American terrorists The Cuban American lobby in Miami has actually been actively carried out terrorist attacks against Cuba during the 1980s. The Brothers in Arms network from the Cuban American National Foundation, founded by Jorge Mas Canosa, who is like the mafia don of the regime change lobby, was attacking hotels, strafing Cubans on beaches to try to harm Cuba's tourist industry, because the tourism industry is key to Cuba having cash and being able to keep its revolution going. So you're looking at people who actually want to destroy a country that they were basically ejected from or voluntarily left because they don't like its socialist system. Maybe their families were affiliated with the right-wing US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista, and they want to harm average Cubans. They are open about it. They would love for the US to bomb the crap out of Cuba so they could come back in and come to power. And before we really get into the details about the protests, I have an investigation coming out about it this weekend about the US role in it. Let me just say, first of all, I've been to Cuba. I actually got to spend several weeks there during one of the worst periods for Cubans, during the special period in the year 2000. It was after the Soviet Union had collapsed, so Cuba was completely cut off from the world economy by the U.S. embargo. The Helms-Burton Act, which punishes any foreign bank that wants to do business with Cuba, any foreign company that wants to do business with Cuba, had come into effect. And things were desperate, and I saw desperation there. I also saw a level of social protection and a social safety net for Cubans that I didn't see for people in places like Mexico or Central America that I visited. You'll never see that in Haiti. You will not see it in the Dominican Republic. These are places that function sort of as neo-colonies for U.S. interests. So Cuba managed to hold on during that extremely harsh period, and then it experienced kind of a rebound with the rise of the Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, with fuel subsidies coming in from Venezuela. There was this new economic south-to-south ALBA system that kind of replaces the World Bank and the IMF and helps countries barter with each other. And so Cuba was starting to do better. And now the economic war has really returned with a vengeance. Cuba is experiencing more economic hardship than it has since I visited over 20 years ago. And in the past weeks, there were scheduled repairs at an electricity plant in Cuba, which necessitated rationing of electricity. And then another plant went down at the same time. And so Cubans were experiencing blackouts. Food is being rationed. There's a syringe shortage because of the U.S. blockade, which makes it harder to vaccinate people, even though Cuba is the only Latin American country to come up with its own vaccine. They have 2 vaccines that actually work, and they're beginning to vaccinate their population around COVID. But there was genuine desperation among the public, and this lobby came in through a kind of classic color revolution style operation and sought to exploit it and get people out in the streets. Whether they could get 300 people out in the streets or several thousand, it didn't matter, as long as they had the image of people protesting in a country that rarely sees protests and rarely has the same kind of desperation that you see in a place like Haiti. And they did that on July 11th. But the goal wasn't necessarily to cause regime change in Cuba, although that's the ultimate goal. The goal was to cause Biden and Washington to come under pressure to not go back to the Obama period of dialogue with Cuba and normalization, and to keep the Trump sanctions in place. And it appears they've already succeeded there. And so when you hear someone call for bombing or anything extra, they don't think they're actually going to get that from Biden. Bob Menendez, the Cuban-American senator, one of the most corrupt senators in recent history, who's a Democrat, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, he said there's not going to be a military intervention. So the point of these characters, these Republicans in Florida, is to actually keep pushing and keep pushing while they're achieving their actual goal, which is to prevent Biden from relieving the 230 new sanctions and economic warfare measures imposed by Trump. Biden's already said he won't restore remittances. It's preventing Cubans from sending money to their family members, and this is costing Cuba billions of dollars a year. So people are dying anyway as a result of this.
So the weird.
So there you go. That's Max Blumenthal, a very informed and authoritative voice on what's going on in Cuba, and it's a disgrace. And viva la revolution, and my solidarity forever will be with Cuba and the people who represent one of our only hopes against capitalism, against rampant, destructive capitalism. So we've got Jeff Bezos on a space dick going into space, and the people of Cuba. And to me, that's very much on the same. That's a scale. That's a balance there. And unfortunately, it's the good guys that are at the bottom at the minute. And I don't know what we can do other than talk about it and draw attention to it. But we must burden ourselves with a bit of information. We must take the time to educate ourselves just a little bit about what is going on in Cuba and what it is. Is everything perfect in Cuba? No. Is Cuba perfect? No. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go down that route because it's a childish argument. Maybe fuck up. Things aren't perfect here. America doesn't intervene in other countries in order to make things better, because show me maybe they'll get it right one of these days, assuming they're telling the truth. I'm just going to assume that they're not telling the truth, that they actually don't give a fuck about the people of these countries that they invade and destroy. So one of the things that we must educate ourselves against, we're nearly done, by the way, nearly done. Let me just see. Right. So over on, we must. When I say about educating ourselves, if you follow the news and the mainstream news and the mainstream media, which I don't. I get bits and pieces, but I don't. I used to, and I just can't do it anymore. But genuinely bad for my blood pressure. I find myself shouting to TV like a fucking idiot quite a lot. But you'll get politicians, and this is one of the most famous politicians
I think there are
in America.
An enormous amount of concerns.
AOC,
first of all,
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she started out, she primaried a major figure within the Democratic Party in America and won. She did it by knocking doors, and she was fantastic on social media. She still is massive. She's millions of followers, huge. But a few years ago, this woman, without a doubt, would have been calling any interventions in Cuba wrong, insane, insanity, American imperialism, etc., etc., etc. I've watched her over the years. She's a fraud. She's a fucking fraud. Watch this.
Now, I think there are an enormous amount of concerns. I, first of all, applaud the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, but this is, the intention of that is to not relocate troops from Afghanistan to anywhere else. And I don't believe that was the intention in withdrawal from the White House either. But this situation is extraordinarily delicate and extremely fragile. And I do not believe right now that the introduction of U.S. troops particularly without any sort of plan, sets any community, whether it's the U.S. or whether it is Haitians, up for success. I do believe that with the assassination, the people of Haiti and the country is in a very delicate moment, and our role should be in supporting a peaceful transition and a peaceful democratic process for selecting a new leader and avoiding any sort of violence, but particularly in really carrying any, supporting any due process for justice here in the United States for any actors that may have been complicit on U.S. soil.
So she's talking there about Haiti. Obviously, Haiti, again, is another thing I never got to talk about. There's so much going on. Haiti's president was assassinated by Colombian mercenaries. Remember, we were talking about mercenaries the other week? About the Afghanistan thing and the withdrawal of troops. And then these mercenaries go, war's going to be more and more privatized. Watch this going forward. These things are going to happen. And it's going to be done by mercenaries. And mercenaries are expendable. They can be caught. They can be blamed. And the people that paid them can get off scot-free. Now, she's talking, what she said is here, I do not believe right now that the introduction of US troops, particularly without any sort of a plan, sets any community, whether it's the US or whether it's Haitians, up for success. Now, that's fucking unbelievable mealy-mouthness from AOC, that she can't just outright say, no, we don't send American troops. We have never achieved anything that we say that we want to achieve by sending troops. The guys behind the scenes achieve lots of shit that they don't tell you, but the stuff that you're supposed to know, that is really the intention, that is really the goal, you'll never know that. They don't tell you that bit. So this is a woman that very short couple of years ago would have been decrying this and calling this out as American imperialism. No troops on the ground. This is disgusting. The people of Haiti do not need it. Blah, 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 blah. And there she's saying, I do not believe right now that the introduction of US troops, particularly without any sort of plan, sets any community up for success. And listening to her now is very, very difficult. She's a fucking waffler. She has turned into a waffler. She goes, and she's just turned into this typical politician that just goes on and gets her screen time, says very little until you dissect it and you realise that she's talking shit. And she's getting called out. Guy here, sanctions kill, with a little Palestinian flag. I can feel the career ambitions radiating from her from here. Simply saying no US military intervention shouldn't be hard unless you're aiming for the big leagues where progress dies, and she is. The imperialist left, somebody called Jamie Kennedy, has called her the imperialist left. It's not an unfair. She's not left. Remember what we were saying the other week. In my measure of left is socialism and anti-imperialism. Both of those things. You can't have one. You can't be economically socialist and be okay with it, throwing soldiers at Haiti or Cuba or anywhere else. So there we go. No US, there is this guy, I'm just reading random quotes here or random tweets. No US troops in either Cuba or Haiti. Those folks will have to fix their own, and they'll be better off for it. They will. One of the things that Sean Rose, liberal in a time of backlash, fails to mention, whenever anybody says anything about Cuba, you've only got one word: blockade or sanctions. Just that's it. All Cuba's problems stem from both of those things. That one thing, the blockade or sanctions, depends on what you want to call them, which are illegal. Again, I should have brought this up. 160 odd countries at the UN just a couple of weeks ago voted to end the US sanctions, and only 2 voted for it: America and the 51st state, Israel. So every other country in the world voted against it. 2 voted for it, so it stays. And they voted that the sanctions are illegal. What's going on this is a thing as well. What the US is doing with the sanctions in Cuba is illegal. There's no law for this. It shouldn't be happening legally. But there we go. So we're going to call it. Going to call it. There we go. That's the end of that section. And now we get into the fun part. Culture bit. What's the culture bit? This is it. This is it. I'm going to turn that bloody face off. I can't stand the sight of her now. She was very exciting when she first came out. The old AOC. She was a bit of hope for the American left. She quickly turned out to not be so. So, culture. Because this politics is called what? Children. Politics and culture and some other shit. This is the culture bit. So, the Bonnevilles, we're playing Stendhal Festival. I should have had the picture up for you, but I'll just show you it on my phone there. There we are. We're not one of the big names up at the top. We're just below that, so you can see the Bonnevilles there, right? Just the second row. And that is, don't know which date it is yet. It's a weekender. We haven't been given the date. 12th to the 14th of August. Ballymully Cottage Farm, Limavady. It's fantastic. Stendhal Festival is one of the best. They have a capacity of thousands. Like, it's a big festival, but they're socially distancing. I think it's 500 tickets, and everyone's all spread out. And they had one, remember Violin Mick from String Ninjas was talking with me last week, and he played. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be very, very exciting. I cannot wait. So we've got that, and we also got confirmed for September for another festival up in Belfast. I don't think I can announce that just yet. It's definitely not in the Cathedral Quarter. So, right. Got book recommend. So that's that giggy thing. Book recommends. You gotta get into it. You gotta get these. We're gonna go for these, and this one. Right, so I'll walk you through these three real quick. This is one of my favourite books of all time. I've recommended this before. I think I've recommended two of these before. I'm going to go again, doesn't matter. Che Guevara, A Revolutionary Life by John Lee Anderson. Right? Now, it's a tome. It is a brick. And the words are really small. Yeah. But it's fucking fantastic. A lot of it at the back is bibliography. So, if you're like me, you like to see a big bibliography and big massive books because it means that they're not. But it is one of those ones that it's a page turner. It's a fantastic read, and it's about him, written by this guy John Lee Anderson, who isn't a socialist. He's an American journalist, and I think he's sort of a old school Republican from like the 60s to the 70s, which wouldn't be in the Republican Party today by all accounts. But it's his life, and there's extracts from his diaries in there, and all different sources. And if you want to know about Che Guevara, this is the book. This is the book. This is the one. Widely regarded and known. This is the one that you go to. So you'll get it. You buy it new. $16.99. Trans World Books. Yeah. Which that's okay for that's quite cheap actually. Bantam Books. Yeah. So, or you can get it like I did on eBay for a couple of quid, and I would recommend you do that. It's a fucking fantastic book, and you come away with it. You come away from it with a deeper love and respect for this great man, and he was a great, great man. He was a great man, and the legend that he has is deserved. In fact, it's even greater than. But it very much humanizes him. This book as well. He was a human being. He was a very deep. He cared a lot about people, and it was his deep humanity that drove him Because he was a middle class Argentinian. He was supposed to upper middle class. He was supposed to go on to be a doctor and all this shit, and he chose this life instead, and ultimately it cost him his own. A follow up to that, and it's one of the things that a lot of people that maybe casually don't follow Ernesto Che Guevara don't understand, is that he didn't stop in Cuba. Well, as we know, he got killed in Bolivia, so we know that bit. But he went to Africa, the African dream, the African campaign in the Congo to defeat the Belgians and the Boers in South Africa and all this sort of stuff. I'll just read on the back of this. In 1964, worldwide conjecture, Che Guevara mysteriously left Cuba, entered the skies and all. It's real sort of space shit. Where he was a minister in Fidel Castro's government. He surfaced incognito in the heart of Africa and decided to put his theories of guerrilla warfare to the test and help the oppressed peoples of Africa throw off the yoke of colonial imperialism. The first task was to assist the young Laurent Kabila in his struggle against the dictator Mobutu, who had seized power in the newly independent Congo. Newly independent from Belgium, wasn't it? Che Guevara's diaries of the expedition, published unabridged, record the bitter failure of a political and ideological dream. They also afford the reader into a very personal insight into the thoughts and emotions of a celebrated revolutionary theorist, and a man whose heroic adventures fired the imagination of a whole generation, but ultimately led to his death in the jungles of Bolivia, and to the creation of one of the 20th century's most potent legends. That's true for sure. So, Ernesto, and it's his diaries. It's extracts from his diaries, by the way. So, yeah. So that's what it is. He was a great diarist. He kept those. Just knock that back there. So, Ernesto Che Guevara, The African Dream, Diaries of the Revolutionary War in the Congo. Very, very good. I love this book too. Another one, 12 quid. This is a belter. Another tome. Big book. Oh, look at my bookmark for it. It's Seamus Heaney. So, My Life, Fidel Castro. Now, what this is, Ignacio Ramonet, it's interviews. So it's in Fidel's own words, and the translation was overseen by Fidel. So any edits, but the edits are in there, so it tells you, this was edited by Fidel himself. So Fidel was very studious and very careful about this book being published and what went into it. But it's fantastic. And it gives you, he talks about his plans and his dreams, his ambitions, his political ideologies, where he come from as a child, where he hopes his country ends up, and you realise that he isn't the absolute monster and good. Despite that photograph, my God, could they not have picked a better one? But despite that, he was not the monster and the ghoul that the right-wing Western media would have you believe. So I would recommend you get that too. And again, you will get it on brand new. This was $25. This is a hardback. I'm sure there's a softback version of it. And I buy all my books on eBay, but I don't buy them from those big sort of offshore places. I buy them from little bookshops in England and stuff, or whatever, wherever I can get them. So, because a lot of those book places, they set up in places like Guernsey where they don't have to pay a tax, but they can ship stuff in. You're not getting a fantastic thing like this for 3 or 4 quid, and you wonder how. That's how. So, check those out. My Life, Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, The African Dream, and Che Guevara, A Revolutionary Life by John Lee Anderson. If I was going to get one, if I was going to start with one, personally, I would go with the Che one, because it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. The Fidel one is too, but this is exciting. This is more exciting for me anyway. But again, you'll not go wrong. You pick either one of the three, you wouldn't go wrong. So I recommend that. I'm not done. There's more. So It was referenced by Max Blumenthal a moment ago. The Wasp Network. I don't know if you've seen this film. So it stars Penelope Cruz, Edgar Ramirez, Gil Gernal Barcia, Ana de Armas, and Wagner Moura. I know who most of those are. It's called the Wasp Network, and what it is, it's about these Cuban traitors who end up going to Miami and betraying their country. Or did they? Say no more. Fucking gorgeous movie. You have to check it out. So it's called the Wasp Network. It's based on a true story. This actually happened. And by all accounts, this telling of the story is very accurate. And the people that are involved, that they portray, are all still alive today. It's fucking fantastic. So check that out. That's all my culture recommends. Those books, just definitely get one. Get one of the three for sure. And check this movie out. It's on Netflix. It was on Netflix. This was only like 2 years ago. You'd be able to get it. Be able to download it, for fuck's sake. You could. Shades of Fidel wouldn't mind. Download it if you want. I'm sure you can get it on YouTube or rent it or whatever. But there it is, the Wasp Network. It's a great movie. It was one of those ones, you know, those ones that you'd never heard of. But if in my Netflix thing, anything comes up Cuba, I watch it. As I said, I'm a bit of a fanboy, a bit infatuated with Cuba. And so this came up, and I read the little thing. So I added that to my list, and it sat there for fucking ages. And then one night I went, man, maybe put this on. Brilliant movie. So check it out, please. You'll thank me if you do. And I think that's us. We're done. I'm gonna go now. I might go and have a beer. I'm fucking roasting. It's heat. I'm not complaining. Just not used to it. That's all. So I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you're watching this on your pod, or you're listening to this on your podcast thing, please like, share, subscribe. Like, share, do it the same on Twitter and Instagrams, Facebooks, the YouTubes, whatever. Get the audience built up. I'm going to try and have a guest in for next week. I don't know who that is at the minute. I have a couple of people in mind, but the old tack is busting me balls, guys. It really is. So we'll see. Anyway, there we go. We're all done. So let me see, where am I? There we go. Bye bye everybody. Take care. Love one another.